Hear that lovely noise. All right, everybody. Well, welcome. We appreciate your time today. We have a lot to get through, so we'll go ahead and jump in. My name is Sarah Gardner. I'm with the University of Kansas Center for Public Partnerships and Research. In my role, I do a lot of work to support the Children's Cabinet, and we're very excited to play a supporting role in the Child Care Capacity Accelerator. We are here today to talk about the letter of interest specifically, and we'll get into a little bit more of the Accelerator program at large, but our focus today will be on that LOI. Melissa Rucker will do most of the chatting today, so I'll turn it over to you here shortly. Just going to run through our agenda real quick. Before I do that, we do have the chat feature open. Please put your questions in the chat as we might get to your question later on in the presentation. So things might come up for you that you're wanting to know about. We really would like to save all the questions until the end of the presentation, just in case we cover some of that stuff. But if it's a burning in your mind, please put it in the chat and we will keep track of it. We will also track the questions that come up today and use them to populate an FAQ document specifically for the Accelerator at large, as well as the LOI specifically, because we know that's the first deliverable for this project. So please drop those questions in the chat. They're very valuable to us, but we will get to those at the end. We're going to go through a little bit of introduction so you know who's going to be speaking today. We'll talk a little bit about the background of where this funding came to be, which is really important for the allowable uses of the funds. We'll give a very high-level overview of the full Child Care Capacity Accelerator. Then we'll talk about the timelines. You can see the full program at a glance, and then we'll dive deeper into that letter of interest. We'll walk through those guidelines and some expectations of that, go through next steps, and then we'll have time for questions. A lot of what we're going to say is actually on the allinforkansaskids.org/communities website, where hopefully you found this information about that LOI. So if you want to pull up those guidelines, you will be 50% of the way there already as we get into the information. So I am, as I mentioned, part of the Child Care Capacity Accelerator support team. There are several of us who check this email address on a regular basis. So please bookmark this if you ever have any questions as we go through the process. We look at this, like I said, on a regular basis, and we're trying very quickly to be responsive to this. But the Children's Cabinet is the grant maker in this particular program. So I am going to turn it over to Melissa Rucker to intro herself as well as the grant manager. Oh, am I on the wrong slide? Melissa? Are we having?
Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. I was in Zoom jail and needed to unmute me. So
thank you.
Appreciate that. Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Rucker. I am the Executive Director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund. I am delighted to see the level of interest and excited about the prospect of finally having funding to support the activities that this particular grant program will be able to support. We've been working really for the last 3 or 4 years trying to source funds for construction purposes and expansion of childcare in this manner. I also want to point out that we are delighted to welcome Lucas Neese to our team as our federal grant manager to manage. He will be the point of contact for this particular Child Care Accelerator project. Lucas comes to us from having his previous role was the Assistant City Administrator with the City of Lindsborg, Kansas, and he has a really wonderful, strong resume, and I believe will be an asset to the team, helping us manage a program that it has some elements that are new to us. So Lucas, I can't see you, but if you can, if you're on camera, maybe make a wave, but we will begin. This is Lucas's first week on the job, so we're gonna get him oriented to the work and move forward where he is the point. He helped Lindsberg put together a project to fundraise and construct a new childcare center for their community, and we have worked together in a couple different ways over the last couple years. Let me give you a little bit of background on the funding that we're using. So a lot of you you all were invited because the core group here probably is the group that submitted project ideas through the Spark idea submission portal, which was something that the state opened up a year ago. We too, as state agencies, were invited to submit proposals, and it took a very long and winding path, but ultimately in December, the Spark Executive Committee made some funding recommendations to the State Finance Council, and just before Christmas, very appropriately, the State Finance Council approved the slate of programs, and the Children's Cabinet was identified to manage a $20 million grant initiative that we'll be talking about today that is focused on the expansion of childcare. That was part of a $38 million allocation that was divided. So the other 18 million is with the Department for Children and Families. They have a program that is similar in terms of it is for construction purposes. It will be for other types of community facilities. It's not limited to childcare. So we're going to take on the childcare specific projects and leave DCF to manage other types of who knows what. They've got their own program criteria. But we are also fortunate that Department for Children and Families is teaming up with us on this program to expand the financial capacity that we have, because we do not want to simply build new buildings and then leave communities struggling to put a program in place to operate in those buildings. So from the Child Care Development Block Grant funding that DCF manages, their ARPA discretionary funds, they have allocated $20 million that we will be blending into this grant. It will be one application on the public side. On the back side, when we are reviewing things, we will determine which bucket of funding is the right one for us to pull money and make awards from for the specific projects that are chosen. And that will all be part of the recommendations that are ultimately made. Together, we're calling this the Child Care Capacity Accelerator. So an overview of what we mean by a Child Care Capacity Accelerator. Very specific purpose involved to support community-based applicants to build or make capital improvements. The key here is that it is to create additional licensed care capacity. So this is not about renovating an existing building to make it more attractive or whatever. This is about adding on. So when we say major renovations or construction, we know from our work in the last couple of years, there are communities all around the state that have either space to build something new, or they have existing buildings that are no longer being used for the purpose they were originally intended. Maybe a church that's closed down, or it may be we've had some really creative ideas, apartment buildings that people want to convert, or medical offices, or different things that need major structural change in order to be safe and able to be licensed as a child care facility. So it's that kind of major construction that we're talking about. It's not about, hey, we already operate a child care center in this space and we're looking to give it a facelift. So that's the key takeaway that we want you to have in mind. We know there's a statewide shortage of childcare seats across communities for a variety of reasons. In some cases, it is the physical space. In other cases, it is the staffing, which would be, what the 20 million from DCF is designed to address. In some cases, it's both, and that will be the request that needs to be considered is funding for both aspects of this. Employers and economic development leaders are joining with early childhood champions in communities all across the state to try and figure this out, because we have major economic development happening, expansion of all sorts of different Kansas industries, both existing businesses and new to the state employers, and we are chasing to keep up with the demand that is creating for childcare seats for their workers and for the communities themselves. So we view the purpose of this program to support these community efforts. We want teams to, and there are many communities that have already done this work, and we've got some programs that are helping facilitate it, but we're looking for community teams that can help build the application programs that that will support construction and capital enhancements to physical facilities, launch operational support, and implement sustainable solutions. Communities need to be thinking through how they will sustain beyond the funding that we are offering, because these are one-time funds that there will be no renewal of this particular program. We want communities to use the funding to build or make the critical capital improvements that are needed to create seats that align with health and safety requirements and address the systemic challenges to sustaining those seats in programs. We are hoping to accelerate the process with this funding. We are hoping that what we receive in the application cycle what we will be looking to fund are projects where our funding is either the last mile funding or it's catalytic funding. And what do we mean by that? We mean you've already got partial fundraising that's gone on. You've identified local dollars, private sector dollars, other sources. Maybe you still have a gap to get to your goal, but so we could fill that gap. Or catalytic funding means you have identified sources of match if you can bring to the table seed money or a particular target amount. Our funding could be that catalytic funding that unlocks match funding that exists for you once you have reached the milestone that is expected. So these really need to be shovel-ready projects that can show demonstrated community financial support, because $20 million is not going to go very far. I know from reviewing the idea submissions that went in last year to Spark, we have any number of ideas submitted from communities that have $20 or $25 million proposals all in one location. So we're going to have to be very careful. This will be a highly competitive process because funding is as limited as it is, and we'll have to make some really tough decisions, unfortunately. So that's why we need the funding that we award to unlock the next step, which is putting shovels in the ground and so to speak, and getting the projects underway. We also have a timeline to worry about with the lifespan of the funds, so we need projects that can get moving fairly quickly. Our hope is that we will build a thriving and sustainable childcare ecosystem by leveraging a number of tools that we already have in our toolkit, and that we will bring to bear to provide support for these projects so that we can see the outcomes that we're hoping for. We have a number of programs that go by a variety of names. We have something that is written into this grant plan called the GO team. This is a team made up of representatives from the key state agencies that is designed to really focus in on troubleshooting specific needs in targeted ways, and leverage the power of having these folks around the table working together from the time they identify an issue, so that we're not playing the game of starting with one agency, but then getting transferred to another and having to go through a whole list of things. So something of a concierge team to help us better navigate the barriers that exist on behalf of communities. We have family navigation supports that we can bring to this to help families make the connections they need. We piloted a program with our grant, and DCF has thankfully picked up on it to expand it to a statewide offering through Child Care Aware. It is called the Communities in Action projects. I hope some of you are familiar with that and have participated, but it's designed to help communities put together the right coalition and partnerships and help them map out the steps that need to be taken. We've been conducting communities in action workshops and doing outreach and engagement support for the better part of this year. That will continue. We have quality improvement resources that DCF offers through a program called Links to Quality, which is the state's quality rating, quality improvement system. We have completed the development of a child care career pathway to support professionals and help us recruit new people to the profession. And hopefully by fall or late 2023, we will unveil the child care workforce registry. So we will help put some actual tools in place for the child care sector to utilize, and we'll make those available. We are seeking certain targeted outcomes. We just want to see the number of licensed care facilities themselves increase. We want to increase the number of seats for children in those programs. We are hoping to improve the recruitment and retention of child care professionals, and overall just improve the ratio of licensed child care to children birth to 5 in communities across the state. Okay, so let's talk about application requirements. We are calling this tentative pending approval by the Office of Recovery. Everything that we're putting out, we are required to first have approved by the Recovery Office to make sure that we are in compliance with the federal requirements of the money we're using and the objectives of the Spark committee and a variety of different criteria. I have been notified that our documents are in good shape. So the asterisk is still on the slide because I don't have the final paperwork, but I feel good about where we are with things. So we've drafted applicant requirements, and we are working on the RFP and application components that we'll be talking about and unveiling in the near future. We wanted to share this with you, even though it's still tentative, to get you thinking and give you as much information as quickly as we can. What we're looking for in a successful applicant is an established community partnership that either has a governance structure or an agreed upon decision-making structure. So that means somebody is identified as the lead of the team, the community champion, we're calling that, to be the point person, to be the person who can tell us, yes, we are in agreement, this is the path forward that we're going to take. That community champion, a key individual at a particular entity that is part of the community team. So that that is an important feature of this, so that when there are questions, when there are requests for information, we know that we're dealing with the final answer when we need it. We also need the community project to be the result of agreement that this is the path that is a net positive for that community, and that you are able to leverage all of the assets in your community. The champion can be anyone among the list, but we just need to make sure that that person is identified. We at the cabinet are required in our statute to use data and evaluation in all of our decision making. So this project will be no different. We will be data driven, and we will leverage data for this work the same way that we do with our other grant programs, so that we are sure that we're covering the full needs of the community and the preference of families, and can also in the end evaluate the success of the funding program. So there are different examples of data that you all can use as you begin to put your application together. One easy one is the Child Care Aware of Kansas point in time tool, which is available on their state level website. That's part of what our team can help point you to, is some of the resources that are available. For capital requests, we're going to be asking about the level of community support for this project. So be prepared to talk to us about what is happening in your community. What commitments do you have? We're going to ask for some documentation for cash contributions or in-kind support that exists. So in-kind on a construction project might be that there is somebody who owns a piece of property and they are willing to let that land be used for this project. It might be that once the building is built, a particular business is going to underwrite the cost of utilities or make a commitment to contributing in some way to the ongoing support. So there's any number of ways that that in-kind support can be documented, but there needs to be proof of those commitments. We also are asking that that thought be given to a sustainability plan, because we have experience in particular instances in Kansas over the last few years where communities came together, did wonderful things with converting space for childcare, and then have been left struggling to keep a program running and sustain it operationally. So we've learned from that, and we want to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. So sustainability planning is important. And then finally, this last one is a requirement for any federal funding for any reason. It's not just childcare. The federal government has converted to a system of registration through the website shown here, sam.gov. You need a UEI, forget the acronym, but the UEI number is required for us to collect on every application. The reason I'm sharing that is with all of the pandemic relief funding that is deployed in the ecosystem right now, there is a high demand at sam.gov, and we want to make sure that you're not held up by waiting on that component. So we would urge you to it's a simple registration, and we would urge that. The unique identification number. Thank you for the lifeline in the chat. Okay, so when it comes to the lead applicant for your community partnership, there's any number of types of organizations and entities, both public and private, that may serve as the lead applicant for your community project. So we just have some examples, but the list is not limited to these types of organizations. So it might be your city or county government. It could be a local economic development entity. It could be some form of community-based organization, private entities. So, it could be a business in your community, it could be your school district, it could be the United Way. We have examples in our work of all kinds of community organizations. It could be an existing provider that takes the lead because they are the provider that's going to be able to expand and run the new facility. So we can coach if you have questions about whether your specific entity is eligible. That's part of what this next few weeks will be about. Is we're going to make ourselves available to coach you and answer those questions. It can be nonprofits. It's any number of groups. So faith-based is welcome, social service organizations are welcome, after school and out of school time organizations, corporations, businesses, licensed providers, health systems, community centers, foundations, libraries. I mentioned school districts, existing early childhood centers, community colleges. We really want creative thinking, and we want to be as inclusive as possible because we want these to be community-driven projects and not a top-down solution coming from the states. So you make the case to us that this is the right person or entity to lead your community effort, and we're going to work very hard to support you in that. We do recommend that it's a group that has the expertise and experience that is necessary to oversee this type of project, including the reporting obligations, because much of what we'll be asking you to provide in return to us as compliance reporting is driven by what the federal program requires and what we have to have on record to process payments. So I can tell you from my experience managing pandemic relief funds, it is an extra lift. So that thought needs to be given to who has the capacity to provide the oversight to the project. So those are our notes of caution. All right, so the timeline, which is very important. Technically, this opened February 3rd. We had our Children's Cabinet meeting Friday morning the 3rd. I had gotten formal approval of our letter of interest the night before, so I thought it prudent to make that available just as quickly as we could. So we announced it on Friday at the Children's Cabinet meeting. Everything has been posted online publicly since then. We used our weekly email to continue to share information. I know the Office of Recovery has an email and they shared the information. We are trying to publicize this as broadly as we can. We sent an email on Monday morning, first thing, that went to those applicants that had submitted a idea to the idea submission portal last year. We need to check and see if they're still interested. Did they solve their issue another way? Are they planning? This is about us doing the fact finding necessary so that we have the resources in place for our review process to be able to process quickly, because the timeline is a heavy lift for grant review and award recommendations, because we want this to happen as fast as humanly possible. We've identified February 20th as the closing date for the letter of interest. You just have to email it. The instructions are on the website. And whatever document form that's comfortable for you is fine. If you just send an email and you answer the criteria in the body of your email, great. If you send a Word document, great. If you put it on a spreadsheet and send it that way, perfect. We need you to convey the information that we're asking for, and I need it to be sent via email to make sure that we have it by the 20th at 5 p.m. We will use the information in those letters to then make some final decisions about the size of awards and how we're approaching the recommendation process. As I said, 20 million is not going to go very far. So we need to gauge the demand that exists. I also will share that if I'm not going to rest until we have ensured that every dollar that might be available is directed this way. So I will be letting the recovery office know that, you know, while we have $20 million, here is the amount of demand expressed through the letters of interest. I think it can't hurt to tell them how much more could be awarded if we had more money to give, because I don't know that whether the legislative process will free up any additional funding for Spark or not, but that is the key, is using that data to make the case that more money for this might be helpful. The tentative application timeline, and again, we still have to go through our own approval process, but what we've submitted is that we will post the RFP on March 10th. There is an online system that will be utilized for the grant application process. The application will be visible, and there will be a period of time for questions to you know, we will answer clarifying questions based on your review of the RFP to make sure you know what is supposed to be submitted and when. The grant system is already in use in the state by Child Care Aware of Kansas for their community partnership grants. We appreciate that their team has agreed to make that same grant application platform available so that communities that have some familiarity with that, you know, that helps as well. The application window will close on May 15th. That's the due date for applications. And then we're committing to a 3-week review period. And you know, based on the interest already expressed, that could be a tall order, but we recognize that we need to get these processed and awarded as soon as possible. We will employ a blind review process with a panel of diverse reviewers using a scoring rubric. We want the review team to be Kansans because we think it's important that there be some familiarity with what our state needs are, what conditions on the ground are. We know this is going to cast a wide net. It will be very difficult to find impartial, you know, people. If we have these community teams, finding reviewers that can be free of conflicts, we will remove identifying information, and the applications will be scored based on a rubric of criteria that is not anchored in the specific names of the program and the community that it's in, so that this is as fair and unbiased as we can make it. There will be some discretion on the recommendations made based on the scoring rubric. We do want to make sure that we are considering applications across the state. So once the scores have been done, part of my job is going to be figuring out what the final slate of recommendations looks like for the Kansas Children's Cabinet to take into consideration. And so we will do some work to make sure that we have a good cross-section of the strongest applicants and bring that slate forward to the Children's Cabinet for approval. Our cabinet meets on a particular meeting cycle, and I don't believe that we're going to hit the June meeting date with a completed slate of recommendations. So I notified the cabinet on Friday to stand ready for us to schedule a special meeting, because we meet the first Friday of the month in June and then again in August, and we're not going to wait for the August meeting. So we will schedule a special meeting of the Children's Cabinet specifically to consider this slate of awards. There is a tentative plan to award in June. It could bleed over to July depending on the meeting date, but it will happen as quickly as we can get it scheduled. There are obligations in terms of the timeline on the funds themselves that we can speak more about at a later date, but obligation deadlines and liquidation deadlines and all of those things. So that will be information found on the website, and we can get more specific that way. So the guidelines for the letter of interest, the purpose of this is to have an opportunity to introduce your project to us and participate in the feedback process to help us achieve alignment with the current fiscal and programmatic scope of the funding. We have to understand what the demand is and how much of it is construction, how much you think might be for operational startup expenses. So the due date, as mentioned, is February 20th at 5 p.m. We talked about any format being acceptable to us. The note here, brevity is encouraged. It's a lot of information we're going to have to plow through very quickly. So hit the highlights. This is not the time to give us the most detailed explanation of your project. We just need enough information to answer the questions that we're asking and get a sense of what is coming. The submission is optional, and the content will have no impact on funding decisions. This is not part of the actual application process, but this is our ask that you help us determine how many reviewers need to be on our review team, determine, you know, the overall scope of the RFP response that we stand to receive, so that we are fully prepared to meet the demand. So the components are on screen. The basic name, address, the identified contact information for your team lead. We want to know what organization, and then the sections involve goals and objectives, the project summary, estimated budget, project completion timeline. We'd be interested in the partners involved, and we're pushing for you to begin thinking about the sustainability planning necessary. So that is all part of this. So we know this is early, and we are not asking you to submit application worthy answers to this, but brief descriptions. It's to help you start framing your thinking. It's to help us start getting a sense of the maturity of the projects out there. So if you can clarify for us if you're going to be applying for both construction and operations, or one or the other. When we are talking about the price point, we know right now it may be a ballpark. We're just looking for a general sense of what the ask will look like. The timeline is just to help us ensure that we can have, that everyone is thinking about whether the project is ready for this funding to be able to proceed. The community coalition information, we know that there are many communities that have already gone through the Communities in Action work with Child Care Aware of Kansas. It is that level of coordination and strategic thinking that we're looking for with these projects, but it may look different for your community. So tell us what you already have or what you intend to build. And it may be a community that's come together organically, that has a business at the center of the conversation because of their employment needs. They may have already identified a childcare provider that they're hoping to partner with. The city or county may already be at the table because they too got direct funding from pandemic relief funds. So this may be happening in your community without any of the support that we've been providing, and that's okay. We're not requiring that you went through Communities in Action, but we are just using that as a really strong example of what we're looking for. It's really important that the licensing division of KDHE is involved from the beginning of your planning. They can be incredibly helpful in determining the viability of an existing building. They can be helpful in guiding the direction that the project takes, and even in brand new construction. So we highly encourage that, in addition to community partners, that Child Care Aware of Kansas is at your table, and KDHE licensing. Area providers are a really important part of community level planning, so we encourage that as well. We are asking that you attest that you have read and you see the alignment between your project and the purpose of the Child Care Capacity Accelerator, with the purpose, goals, and outcomes. We've shared a little bit about those in this presentation. There's more information posted on the website and better described there. We can continue to offer information about this. But if your project honestly is not going to increase the number of licensed seats in your community, it is not in alignment with the purpose of this funding. So that is the attestation that we are looking for, that you are aware of the reason that these funds will be awarded. Can't be said too many times. Submit the letter of interest by February 20th at 5 p.m. We really, really would appreciate if you think you're going to be applying for these funds. This letter will help us plan effectively. The address on the screen, ccaccelerator@ku.edu, is the email set up specific for this project. You can ask specific questions by email to that address, and we will get a response back to you ASAP. We are also, as Sarah said, using these questions to build out the FAQ resources that will be posted on our website. We will be announcing the official rollout of the RFP intended for March 10th. There will be another webinar. We post the recording of the webinar it'll be on allinforkansaskids.org under communities. So the recording will be available. So if people who are on your team aren't here today, the chance will be available to have them watch this, for you to come back and refer to something. What did she say in that one section? You can go back and find it online. All of the materials pertaining to the grant will be posted as soon as we get Recovery Office approval, or as we get approval. So as things are approved, they will be added as resources. We'll use the conversation we have today to create the FAQs and post that. And additional resources, links to things that we think you might find helpful, will all be found on this website. So I think it's really time for questions, and I'm gonna let Sarah moderate what's in the chat that I haven't answered, and manage the discussion.
I've got the questions. Actually, Melissa, this is Julie. Here are some questions that have come up. Our center is in the process of getting their license, but has not received it at this time. Do you have to be a licensed child care center for you to apply, or can you be in the process of getting it?
I think if you demonstrate that you're in the process and that these funds are needed, I think that's why we want KDHE at the table. So there needs to be some confirmation that you are actively in the process. So, but they are intended for licensed childcare programs.
Thank you. Another question is, if an organization has applied for any other type of Spark or Base, Sprint, etc., are they eligible to submit for Child Care Capacity Accelerator?
Yes.
Can the future funding come from past evidence of organizational funding trends?
I think we want more of a commitment than, hey, in the past this group has given to us, they probably will in the future. I think if there's a standing commitment that there's an annual contribution that can be demonstrated, that's fine. But I think we need evidence that our funds will actually allow you to put shovels in the ground and move forward on the project.
Okay. Another question, and this was either directed to you or Sarah, I apologize. Is it possible to have is it possible to have parts of a grant funded if reviewers feel the full ask might be too much? Can funds be used for sign-on bonuses?
Sarah,
I think the question is about would we partially fund requests, like if something came in and it was over the amount that we had in the full slate. I think that's what Melissa was referencing around the slate being a little bit of putting the pieces together, a little bit of Tetris, and making sure that we're having the biggest impact with the funding. So it's not I think a hard and fast yes or no that we'll either fund all of it or fund none of it. I would imagine there's several submissions that we would look at partial funding.
I mean, ultimately, we know our funding is partial funding for the project. So there's that component of it. But again, if you need $10 million and we can give you $1 or $2 million or whatever, and you have no proof that the other 8 million is coming, that's a long way from shovel ready. And we're going to have trouble feeling good about encumbering funds in an award to you in the hope that you make it to that ultimate goal. So you really need to give thought to how these funds bring you to the point where construction work happens, operational startup is handled, and doors open at some point in the project timeline.
Next question, will a program of study, early childhood education, qualify as an allowable applicant? We would be increasing recruitment and retention of child care professionals by providing the appropriate certification.
We love that you're doing that, but that is not the purpose of this particular grants award program. So we love that you're doing that. We at the cabinet would love to hear from you, and if there are needs that you have financially to expand the work you're doing, we're open to conversation. I don't know what funding source we might be able to leverage, but I'd love to know more about what you're doing. But no, this grant program is not for you.
And is there an age range for this grant?
Age range, meaning for the children in care?
I think that's what that question
means. That's what I'm
yeah.
assuming. It does not say, but that's what I assume.
Well, licensed childcare eligible. So, that runs the gamut from birth to, I don't know the outer end of what is considered licensed childcare. I'm assuming it's probably 12 years old or so. So it needs to be licensed childcare facilities. As I said, there is a funding program I know nothing about other than DCF is overseeing another $18 million piece of the award that Spark and State Finance Council approved for other forms of community construction projects. So if it's a center that might be for youth, that are not technically in licensed childcare, it may be a community center so that you have a program for teenagers to go to. Great, go. I would check out the DCF funding opportunity or some of the Department of Commerce programs. If yours is not going to culminate in the doors opening on licensed childcare, this is not for you.
And then this has come up several times. Can two separate child care centers apply for the grant as one?
Well, I would need to understand that question a little better in terms of the intent of the project that results. I mean, this is a team effort in communities. If 2 childcare providers are going to build a 3rd location, yeah, sure. If each of them, I'm not sure I understand any other relationship between 2 providers applying together.
I would underscore what Melissa noted about the community submission. Whoever is representative of that community, yes, come together, have a partnership, submit an application. If the funding results in 2 childcare providers increasing slots, yes, that's allowable, but this is about a community approach. However you organize that, however you define community, the goal is to make sure this is a net positive for your community. So what we don't want to have happen is that one center is able to open doors and is able to pay a higher wage because of these funds and pulls teachers from other centers or other facilities at the local level. So we just want to make sure this is a community supported approach, whatever that means to you at the local level.
And then we have a home child care provider asking, I have 2 home daycares to help out my community, but that's not enough. I also have a waiting list. I'm now working on a center. How will this help a small business owner who's expanding?
Well, it potentially could help. I mean, you have to meet the criteria that we've set up to be a community-driven effort. There is work afoot to help increase, from KDHE, from the licensing side of things, that they are really helpful in helping the home-based providers figure out how to grow in their business setup. So this is a provider, it sounds like, already has figured out she can own the business and have several licenses, license programs in homes. And I love that you are looking to expand and grow in your community. Put together a coalition and apply, because we would love to be able to help you.
Julie, I want to interrupt here real quick and just point out the comment that was in the chat, the very bottom of the chat, if you're following along. It's a partner who submitted a Spark. They were in the middle of renovations to their existing building, got it up and running, and now have a need for operational support. That is the beauty of this funding, is that there is two buckets. We are blending on the back end. You are writing one application. You are telling us what you need. And from there, we are saying, you're a good fit for this. You're a good fit for this. So that's a perfect example of a community meeting their needs and then still having a gap to fill, whether it's operational or it's construction. So Brittany, to your question, yes, absolutely. If you are adding seats to your community and you need operational support, that is a good fit for this, this particular funding.
And then there was another one that came up. Are there any specifics on reporting requirements? Would they include screenings, class observations, or DAISY entry?
Sarah, yes, that's the cabinet brand. That's what we do. And so, yes, we will be asking that there be commitment to the quality improvement work and the work that we do here. So there will be details about all of that in the RFP itself.
Can we do operational and construction costs in one application?
Yep, to reiterate, that is how we are building the application. It will have enough detail that you will see where you put in the portion of your project that relates to construction, the portion of your project that relates to operations. Nobody is required to fill both ends of that out. If you need one or the other, that is fine. If you need both, that is the point of this, is to give you one application process that shows us how you will get to doors open and children receiving care in additional slots for this community.
Another question, is there going to be specific regulations on our actual program if we receive the funds, regulations beyond the KDHE standards?
No, those are the licensed childcare regulations that exist in the state. So.
All right. Are starting new group homes eligible for funding as opposed to a center? Our center has deemed it more sustainable to utilize group homes.
That's why this is a community-driven approach. We want the solution that is right for your community. So if that is a perfect example. We know all across Kansas, there are communities that are too small to support an actual child care center. But yeah, absolutely. You are eligible to apply.
When you are talking community support, does that mean the city commissioners or any organization within this community?
We are not prescribing for communities what community level support looks like. We are asking you to demonstrate to us that you have community support.
Sorry, I'm just looking through some of these you've covered already within your presentation, so I want to make sure that's not duplicated.
There's a couple nuances in the chat around licensed capacity versus actual filling of those seats and what we mean by expansion of seats. If you are not able to meet your licensed capacity because you do not have enough workers in your community, you can apply for this funding or be part of your community partnership in applying for this funding. That is you saying we need more workers to be able to fill a classroom, staff a classroom. So this is not necessarily about a physically constructed seat. It's about more seats available to families. So just want to clarify that. But again, it's about the community approach to the submission.
And then there was one other, are there any restrictions to entities that are church related?
No, we've already mentioned faith-based are welcome.
You guys have a lot of good ideas going on here in the chat. This is great. This is why that letter of interest is so critical. So I'm going to kind of ease us into the end of the webinar. We are noting the questions. We've also, we're able to track who asked the question. And so if there is a very specific example, because you've registered and you've given us your email address, we may come back to you directly if it doesn't feel like an FAQ that needs to be put into a formal document. So stay tuned for more information. We will send something out to everyone who registered for this webinar with a link to the information, a link to that LOI guidelines, and information about that FAQ document. I would just reiterate what Melissa said, that the LOI is not option or is optional. Is optional, but it's so helpful for us. So we have tried to make it as flexible as possible in terms of what you have to produce. If you have already written a proposal, just use that and add a few things. You don't need to recreate something for this purpose if you already have some good work done. If you have ideas and you have questions, please email us. We'd be happy to engage in a conversation with you. We want to make sure that we're clear on who's a good fit because we can imagine that this is going to be a bit of a lift for communities when we get to that RFP process, and we want to be clear with communities about who's going to be a good fit and who might we need to point to other funding opportunities. So Melissa, would you like to say any final words as we wrap up?
I appreciate the interest. I appreciate your time, and we stand ready to assist. So just remember that help is available as you work your way through the requirements of the program. If we missed your question today, please email it to us and we will endeavor to get back to you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Yep. Thank you.